Welcome inside the War Room. I'm your host, Andrew Valancourt, and we're back today for episode 90 of the Dynasty War Room podcast. On today's show, we're going to break down the 2026 Dynasty rookie draft class. I've got previews written up here for all four positions, and it's that time of year, right? February, the draft is approaching in just a few months, and it's that time of year where we have to get familiar with the incoming rookies ahead of rookie draft season. So I've got all the positions here: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end. We'll run through, with the help of Mock Draft Database, all the guys that are projected to be relevant fantasy contributors, and probably go past that even. It's going to be pretty comprehensive, and so we'll dive into all of that shortly. But first, big announcement. Fast Draft. You've heard me talk about it on this show for a long time now, but it is active and live in Michigan. So for those of you who are unaware, I am based in Michigan. I know I have a number of listeners that are also here in Michigan, and up until now, you haven't been able to take advantage of my promo code WARROOM on the Fast Draft app. But now it's in Michigan. You are able to get it on your phone, your tablet, whatever platform you would like, and use code WARROOM, that's all one word, WARROOM, when you sign up, and you'll get a $50 deposit match to use on best ball drafts and every other exciting contest that Fast Draft has going on. So the Rabbit is the name of their big best ball contest, and similar to other platforms that you may have heard, like Underdog and DraftKings, Fast Draft is going to be a place where you can do those best ball drafts. So go check that out using our code. That helps the show out, and it's much appreciated. Now, in regards to our show, I know we were off again last week, and I think at least for the short term, we are still going to be on an every other week schedule, just with the nature of things going on in the real world with work and all that good stuff. But at some point here, probably at the beginning of March, we'll be back into every single week. So for now, while we are still on this every other week schedule, I'm going to try to pack in as much as I can to make these shows, nice and worthwhile, since there is a little bit more of a wait. So with all that being said, follow the show on your platform of choice. We're in everything out there: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, you name it. And so we appreciate a follow. If you leave us a 5-star review, that's great as well. And find us on social media. So Twitter or X is going to be our primary platform, but we're on YouTube as well. We have a Facebook page, so go check us out. Our handle on Twitter is @DynastyWarRoom, and we're happy to interact, answer any questions you have there, or things that you want to see coming up on the show. All right, so I think we have all of the logistical stuff out of the way, all the promos, and I think that means it's time to dive into this year's rookie class. So just to start with kind of a brief class overview, I think that is going to be an important place to begin, especially as, trades start to come up in your leagues where, hey, how should I be valuing my early first, my late first, my second and thirds, all that kind of thing. So let's kind of start there with a general idea of what to expect from these rookies. Now, in Dynasty, especially Superflex leagues, rookie classes tend to get judged a lot based on the quarterbacks and the running backs that are in the class. And unfortunately, if you are a Dynasty manager that is in need of a quarterback or a running back, unless you have the first or second overall pick in your league, chances are you are not going to get an impact player at either one of those positions. It is, Fernando Mendoza from Indiana is projected to be the number one overall pick. He is going to be the guy at the quarterback position. And then there's Jeremiah Love at Notre Dame, who's projected to be a top 15 pick at the running back position. And those two guys are pretty much it at those two positions in terms of true impact, day one starters, potential elite fantasy options. So when you get past those two guys, you're talking dart throws, not guaranteed starters. The quarterback class may have one or two other players that can sneak into the first round. I think Ty Simpson is somebody being talked about as a first rounder. There's a lot of questions about Trinidad Chambliss and whether or not he will be able to get back to Ole Miss for another season or whether he will be forced into the NFL. That's going to come down to an NCAA ruling. But all that to say, QB class is weak. It's Mendoza and then everybody else. Running back class, it's Love and then everybody else. So the real strength of this draft class is going to be the wide receivers. I think there are a number of highly talented wideouts that are going to be, impact guys for Dynasty. So there's going to be three huge names at the top that you've probably heard about by now. That's going to be Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, and Mekhi Lemon. And those three guys are probably going to round out the top 5 of most rookie drafts, along with Love and Mendoza. And then after that, there's a ton of guys that are currently projected to be second-round picks in the NFL. And the order of those players is going to be completely different for every single analyst, every single manager out there, because there is so much wiggle room in terms of, okay, what style of receiver do you want? Do you prefer the more of the slot speed guys? Do you want the big body X receiver? Do you want the route runners? Do you want the guys that, chain movers, touchdown, red zone threats? There's all sorts of different options with that second and third and fourth tier of wide receiver. So that's where the depth of this class is. The top 2 rounds in rookie drafts, the top 24 picks, the vast majority of those picks are going to be wide receivers. There'll be some running backs that fill in. I think there's a handful of interesting names that we'll discuss today. But the running backs, I think, take the prize as the most interesting and deep group in this draft class. Now, the tight end position, the top name, Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. He's projected to be a first-round pick. As it stands right now, he is the only projected first-rounder in this draft class at the tight end position, an athletic guy. And other than that, there's a couple other names that I think are pretty interesting that might have day 2 value, but it's not super deep at the tight end position, at least compared to, the past couple classes. So that's kind of the general overview. I think it is setting up to be a weaker rookie draft class, especially, I think, both for the NFL overall, but also for fantasy. So, we've heard a lot about the 2027 draft class as being this elite, awesome class. And at least on paper, it certainly appears like it will be better than 2026. Now, will 27 be as elite as, 2024? I don't know if I'm quite there yet. But, there's going to be a lot of options to, if you love the 2026 class, I don't think it's going to be very difficult to acquire additional first-round picks. And there's going to be a lot of managers that are looking to move back to 27, which may end up being tougher than a normal year where, in years past, you could trade your current year's first-round pick and pick up a second plus a future first. I don't know if you're going to be able to pull that trade off unless you have a top 5 or 6 pick from this year. It seems like we kind of have a top 6 that is separating itself at the current moment, although we are very, very early in the process. But that would be Mendoza and Love. Love is pretty much the consensus 101, Mendoza at the 102, then you have those 3 wide receivers, and then Sadiq at 106. So that's kind of the top 6 at the current moment. And as we find out every single year, a ton will change, a ton can change, and we'll just have to see how things shake out over the next few months between the combine and, obviously the NFL draft capital itself is going to play a huge role in these rankings. And, we'll check back. We'll have all kinds of ranking shows as we get closer to the NFL draft where I have more of a chance to dive into all of these players. Today is more of an overall look at here's all the names that you should know or be on the lookout for, as opposed to a set of rankings or anything like that. So let's move on into the players, since I've been talking for almost 10 minutes already here. And talk about some quarterbacks and to get into the other positions. Like I said, the wide receivers are going to be the biggest portion of the show, but I'm going to run through a whole bunch of names. I've got stats, height, weight, all that kind of thing. So at quarterback, the number one player, both overall and at the position, is currently Fernando Mendoza, quarterback out of Indiana, projected to be the Vegas Raiders starting quarterback next year, who, according to today's news, we're recording this on Sunday, February 1st, are set to hire Clint Kubiak as their next head coach. And, the last time that we had a show, you were probably listening to me talk about, well, hey, I'm about to watch the national championship game. I went to Indiana, so I'm an IU alum, and we'd find out how happy or sad I would be the next day. And we're in a great mood. So, Indiana winning the national title, it's almost unthinkable that a school like IU that's been so dreadful in football for practically its entire existence is now king of the college football landscape. And Mendoza was the guy that got that done. Him and Coach Curt Cignetti, a great duo. And Mendoza is someone that seems like your prototypical NFL quarterback. He's 22.3 years old as of February 1st. He's 6'5", 225 pounds. He had a 91.6 PFF grade this year, which is substantially above all the other quarterbacks in this class. Won the Heisman Trophy, threw for 3,535 yards, 41 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions, 72% completion percentage. He also could run the ball a little bit. So he had 76 carries for 377 yards and 7 touchdowns, which stacks up pretty well among this draft class. So I like using PFF for QB rushing stats because they're one of the few sites that is able to take out quarterback sack yardage. If you go to like ESPN or Stat Reference or any of those sites, they will show a rushing stat that includes all the lost yardage from sacks. PFF sorts those out for us, which is great because the NFL does not include sack yardage in quarterback rushing stats. And so I think for, getting ready for the NFL draft and getting a true feel for a player's ability to run as a QB, getting rid of the sack yardage is really important. So, looking at it this way, if you can get 377 yards, 7 touchdowns is already incredible, but, almost 400 yards and a few touchdowns is going to be, that's a pretty substantial boost to an NFL quarterback's baseline. So he's not a statue. Is he fast? No. I would not qualify him as a fast quarterback. But he's a very smart quarterback. He's extremely tough. He'll take the big hit. Now, one thing that might get him in trouble at the NFL level is he does not slide. He will just full on take the hit, try to push forward for extra yards. And when he does do some sort of a dive, it's usually like a, head first type of situation. He's not sliding. So he's got to be careful of that at the NFL level so he doesn't end up with more fumbles or an injury or anything like that. In fact, there was one play in the playoff game against Oregon where he took off and had a nice run, and then he continued to fight for extra yards, but then he got hit and fumbled the ball. And fortunately, a teammate was able to land on it, but those are the types of plays that he's going to have to be a little bit smarter about at the NFL level. But other than that, that's a very nitpicky thing. He can do it all. We talked about the size. Hard to draw up a better, quarterback from a size standpoint at 6'5", and very good at ball placement. He's a very accurate passer. He's an incredible back shoulder thrower, and he's made just NFL throw after NFL throw throughout the season. Makes good decisions. They ran a lot of RPO. So of course, with quarterbacks, it's a very difficult position to evaluate from a prospect standpoint, but on paper and, just being able to see what he's done throughout the season, he possesses all the traits. He's just got to go out and continue to get it done at the NFL level. So Fernando Mendoza, the clear first quarterback, and we're going to be using Mock Draft Database to sort of rank these players, so to speak, for now. So this is not my rankings. These are in order of projected draft capital according to Mock Draft Database. I think there will be a lot of shifting within these tiers just in terms of when they're going to be drafted. And then, of course, my own rankings will be vastly different than simply whatever the NFL draft order is. So Mendoza, the clear number one quarterback, and he'll be the guy that, again, projected 102 in rookie drafts behind Jeremiah Love. Next up at the quarterback position is Ty Simpson from Alabama. He's currently projected to be a late first-round pick, 23.1 years old, 6'2", 208 pounds, 83.1 PFF grade. He also threw for a little over 3,500 yards, 28 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 64.5% completion percentage. He also ran for 292 yards and 2 more touchdowns. So he's an athletic guy. He can move around, certainly not a bad passer. I think he leaves a bit to be desired. I think you just saw, if anyone watched that Alabama-Indiana playoff game, the difference in quarterback play was pretty immense. Simpson doesn't have as much starting experience as Mendoza. Mendoza was a starter for a couple years at Cal before coming to IU. Simpson has stayed at Bama his entire career, and this was his first real year, getting production. So I think that leaves, you would have loved to have seen him get a few more starts or potentially go back to school, but you can't blame a guy for entering the draft when the class is this weak. There's potential for him to be a first-round pick. So Ty Simpson, he's somebody that I think will end up slotting into late first round of rookie drafts simply because of his position. I don't know that I'm going to be a big fan of Simpson, but it's one of those, hey, super flex leagues, the quarterback position is highly, highly important, and he'll kind of force his way into the conversation because of that fact. And number 3 is Trinidad Chambliss, Ole Miss quarterback, transfer from Ferris State, and he's currently projected to be a second-round pick, 23.4 years old, 6 foot, 200 pounds, 87.8 PFF grade. He threw for over 3,900 yards, 22 touchdowns to only 3 interceptions, 66.1% completion percentage. He also ran for 585 yards and 8 touchdowns. Chambliss is the huge wild card in this class at the QB spot because he is trying to go back to school to play another year at Ole Miss. There's a big NCAA lawsuit going on, and so he is petitioning for an extra year due to what he's arguing should have been a medical redshirt for one of his years at Ferris State. So we'll see if he gets that 6th year or not. Currently, he does not have it, so we are including him here as a potential NFL draft pick. He is much more of a dual threat guy than some of these other names on the list. I don't think he's as strong as a passer as Simpson or Mendoza, but he is more athletic and can run the ball more than the others. So there's going to be some potential, interest in him as a developmental starter. So you could see him going to a team like the Rams or someone that can let him sit for a year or two before taking over. But, we'll see what happens. I don't want to get too much into Chambliss until we have a final decision from the NCAA. But for his sake, he might almost be better off going to the NFL because next year's quarterback class is expected to be a lot deeper, and he could get buried a bit on the list. But, hey, with the way that NIL is, you can't blame a guy for trying to go back and maximize on that current value that he has after Ole Miss's great season and run in the playoffs. All right, so after Chambliss, it is pretty much everybody else is going to be starting their careers as a backup, and whether or not they get any starts is going to be highly dependent on their situation and the team. But I'll quickly run through all of these names. I think there's really 3 names to pay attention to in terms of, real dark horse value to go on day 2. And that's Garrett Nussmeier out of LSU. He's currently projected to be a 3rd-round pick. Carson Beck out of Miami, and Drew Aller out of Penn State. And Aller and Beck are both projected 4th-rounders. And Beck is 23, Aller is 21, almost 22, and both good size. Beck is 6'4", 220, Aller is 6'5", 235, and both had, they're interesting because Aller is more of the projection guy, right? The potential. He was talked about as a first-round pick coming into the year. He's got the size. He threw for 1,100 yards, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. He also ran for over 200 yards in just the 6 games this year before getting hurt. But he did struggle. Penn State struggled a lot, obviously firing their coach, moving on from James Franklin. And, Carson Beck has been around a while. He played at Georgia. He's certainly been a winner at the college level, but, throws interceptions at a rate that you wouldn't like to see from an NFL prospect. He had 12 of them this year, but he did throw for 3,800 yards and 30 touchdowns to go with that. And not much of a runner, only 150 yards on the ground. So I prefer Aller over Beck at this stage, but it wouldn't shock me if Aller can work his way up draft boards a little bit just based on that potential that NFL GMs love so much. Carson Beck, to me, I think he's just more of a career backup guy, valuable experience, and, can manage a game, but I don't think he's somebody that's going to ever really turn into a high-end NFL starter. And then Garrett Nussmeier, who we kind of glossed over, but he is currently projected to go ahead of Beck and Aller out of LSU, and he's an older prospect. He's about to turn 24. He's a little smaller as well, 6'1", 205, more in line with Chambliss size-wise, and he really struggled this year at LSU. 1,900 yards passing, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 67% completion percentage, and he's not a runner at all, only 64 yards on the ground, only 24 attempts. So he's not going to give you much of a fantasy floor in terms of the rushing. Does he possess certain traits? Another highly talked about guy, yes, but I don't see it at this stage in the game. So, NFL backup. A few other names to keep an eye on that are projected to go on day 3. We got Sawyer Robertson out of Baylor, Cade Klubnik out of Clemson, Taylon Green out of Arkansas, and then Cole Payton out of North Dakota State. These are all 5th, 6th round guys. They're all older prospects, 22, 23 years old. They all have good size, and a couple of them are highly effective on the ground. So Green and Payton are great running quarterbacks. Green had almost 1,000 yards and 8 touchdowns. Payton had almost 913 touchdowns. Both are okay passers. Payton probably better than Green, but is doing so again at North Dakota State, so different level of competition. Whereas Green, he's 6'6", 235. He's a crazy good athlete, but he really struggles throwing the ball. So we've seen that archetype kind of come through where it's just completely boom or bust. But I could see a team taking him on day 3 to develop, potentially turn into a backup where, hey, we're gambling on some traits and we'll see what happens. Klubnik is a guy that was talked about as a first-round pick coming into the year. He was not that great this year, just under 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, moderate numbers on the ground, 220 yards rushing. So not a ton that really excites me there, but just a few other names to know heading into draft season at the quarterback position. All right, so let's move on to some more important fantasy names, and we'll talk about some running backs. Now, Jeremiah Love is currently projected to be the highest drafted running back on the list, and it's by far, it's not even remotely close. Love is likely going to go in the top 10 or top 15 at worst in the draft. Went to Notre Dame. He is 20.7 years old as of right now, so you love that from an age standpoint. You're going to have a lot of really prime years in the NFL. And he's got good size as well, 6 foot, 214, 93.1 PFF grade. So just an awesome all-around player, was in the Heisman conversation, and he ran the ball 199 times for 172 yards, 18 touchdowns. He also caught 27 passes for 280 yards and 3 more touchdowns. So he can do it both on the ground and through the air. He's elusive. He's a home run threat. There's a ton to like about him. I think the only question mark for Love is simply if he's going to be someone in the NFL that can handle a huge workload. I don't know if this is going to be like a 250 carry type of guy. 200, yes, but it wouldn't shock me if he's in a situation where there's somebody else that spells him from time to time to keep him fresh. That's what Notre Dame did with Jadarian Price, who happens to be number 2 on this list. So college teammates. And Price is a projected 3rd-round pick right now, so that kind of shows you the gap in this class from the top to the next tier. He's 22.3 years old, 5'11", 210 pounds, 78.6 PFF grade, and he helped balance the load with Jeremiah Love. So he had 113 carries of his own for 674 yards, 11 touchdowns, only caught 6 passes, although 2 of them went for touchdowns. So Price also has home run ability, and I think that's what made Notre Dame's backfield so good was it didn't really matter who was there. They could break free at any point, and so between the two, really great production. And he's more of a power guy, I think, compared to Love, who is more of that elusive, will make you miss type of player, but they're not that different. Price is actually a little bit smaller than Love. So I think there's going to be an NFL team that can, find a good spot for him, and he'll probably get a bigger workload in the NFL, just given the circumstances where, finally won't be sharing a backfield with, the best running back in college football. Number 3 on the list, currently projected to be a 3rd-round pick, is Jonah Coleman out of Washington. He's 22.4 years old, 5'9", 228 pounds, and he had an 82.1 PFF grade. And Coleman is somebody that, he is a little bit smaller height-wise, but he has a big frame at 228. He's a powerful, inside guy. He had 15 touchdowns this year. 156 carries for 758 yards. He also caught 31 passes for 354 yards and 2 touchdowns. So he is a dual threat guy, which you really like from a fantasy perspective. I think that the total yardage is just a little bit underwhelming to me at first glance. And he'll be somebody that I'm interested to see some tape on and see how he fares through the draft process, because I think it's really a wide open race for the RB2 spot between about 4 different guys. So Price, Coleman, and then Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska and Nick Singleton out of Penn State could all end up as the RB2 in this class. So Johnson, we just mentioned him, went to Nebraska, projected 3rd rounder, and he is more of one of those all-around running backs. Great pass catcher is really what sets him apart. He's 6'2", 200 and, or 5'11", 200, and 85.6 PFF grade. He's 22.3 years old, and he had a huge workload in Nebraska. So he had 251 carries for 1,451 yards and 12 touchdowns. He also caught 46 passes for 370 yards and 3 touchdowns. So he was practically Nebraska's entire offense. So that certainly is appealing to know that, hey, he can grind it out in the Big Ten for over 1,400 yards. But 46 receptions as a college running back is a number that you don't see a lot, especially from, a big-time school like Nebraska. I think you see sometimes more of the small school guys that have just those high-flying offenses where sometimes they'll rack up the huge reception totals. But I don't think you see that a ton at some of these bigger programs. And Johnson put together a really nice line. So he's somebody that, just based on the stats, is someone that I'm going to have interest in and will certainly be right there in the mix for RB2. Now, next up, we got Nick Singleton out of Penn State. We had just mentioned him a minute ago. He's the last of the projected day 2 picks in the third round. 22 years old, 6 foot, 224, and he had a bit of a rough season. So, like a lot of these Penn State players that will come up in this draft class, had a down year. Ran the ball only 123 times for 549 yards, 13 touchdowns, 24 catches for 219 yards and a touchdown, 77.6 PFF grade. And he shared a backfield with Kaytron Allen, who is next as a projected 4th round pick. And he's 23 years old, 5'11", 219, but he had a much higher PFF grade at 89.5. He also carried the ball significantly more this year. Allen had 210 carries for 1,303 yards, 15 touchdowns, and then 18 catches for 68 yards. So Singleton was the better pass catcher this past season, and Singleton really had been thought of as more of the NFL guy, but Kaytron Allen really kind of took over that job over the latter half of the season, and obviously significantly better production this year on the ground. Both players had good careers at Penn State. They were involved right away as freshmen, shared the backfield really 4 years together. So I think they're two of the most intriguing players in the draft class because you never got a chance to really see one just be the guy. And you would have to think that based on their production over the years, if they had gotten that opportunity, they probably would have really exploded in terms of NFL draft, projections. But because they continued to share the field, neither one had a chance to really break away. So I'm going to keep my eyes on those two. Singleton unfortunately suffered a broken foot during the Senior Bowl week, so that's going to be a big hindrance for him. He's going to be unable to boost his stock at the Combine, so that's going to be a huge bummer. That has a pretty good opportunity to bump him down to the 4th round, maybe even 5th, and Kaytron Allen will then have a chance to be drafted ahead of Singleton. So keep an eye on that situation, but those Penn State guys are pretty interesting for fantasy. Now, I think there's kind of a clear drop-off after the two Penn State guys. As we get into, 7 through the rest of the list from Mock Draft Database, we're talking guys that are going day 3, 5th round or later at the moment. So we won't go into all of the stats for every single one of these guys, but I'll run through names and schools and that sort of thing. So currently, Mock Draft Database has Kentucky running back Seth McGowan as the next player on the list. Now, he's 25 years old, so he's an older player. He's played, a very long time in college at this point. He's 6'1", 215, and so he's going to be one of those players that I probably just based purely in the age. I'm not going to be that interested in. He also only had 725 yards on the ground. Damon Claiborne out of Wake Forest, more of a speed guy, shifty pass catcher. He's 22.3 years old, 5'10", 195, and got it done both rushing and receiving, but did not break 1,000 yards rushing either. Roman Hemby out of Indiana, 5th round projected pick right now. He's 23.4. And he spent a few years at Maryland where he was highly productive and broke out early before transferring to Indiana last year. And he is 6 foot 210, so he has that NFL size, 80.9 PFF grade. So of these kind of later round guys, that stands out. He also hit the 1,000-yard mark. So he had 230 carries for 1,120 yards, 7 touchdowns. He also caught 17 passes for 165 yards. So he is the clear pass-catching running back in the Indiana offense. He caught far more passes over at Maryland, so he has good hands, and that's going to make him a potential intriguing mid-round guy, just because he can do both things, rush on the ground and receive the ball. So he's a guy that I'll have my eye on. As an IU fan, having watched all the games, I will say I don't know that he necessarily stood out as a special player, but certainly a solid player. Frankly, at times, Kalen Black was the better running back. He's a late day 3 guy that I want to throw in here as a brief mention. Projected, 6th or 7th round pick, and he's 24 years old. But Kalon Black at 5'10", 211, had a higher PFF grade at 83.7. He ran the ball for 186 times for over 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. Only caught the ball 4 times, so it doesn't really add much in the receiving game, at least from a statistical look. Started at James Madison with Kurt Cignetti and then transferred over. He's a very powerful runner that I could see moving his way up draft boards throughout the process. I think he already was pretty highly regarded coming out of the Senior Bowl as one of the winners at the running back position. So just a name to remember, a potential, 3rd or 4th round rookie dart throw as we talk about the Indiana running backs. But back up to the 5th round players and some of these other guys. Mock Draft Database has at number 10 Jamari Taylor out of Virginia. Another older guy at 23.8, 5'9", 204. He had 1,000 yards. He also caught 43 passes this year. So after transferring, from a non-FBS school, I think he was in the FCS, and then came over to Virginia where he had a nice season. So definitely has the production, so he could be an interesting guy. Mike Washington Jr. out of Arkansas is a name that I've seen get some steam on social media lately. He's 6'2", 228 pounds. He had 1,000 yards on the ground. He also caught 28 passes. So big, powerful guy, and that's something that teams might look for. And then next up, we'll go through these a little bit quicker to head on over to the wide receivers. But and this, I think, just highlights the fact that it's a relatively weak class at the running back position, because in most years we've had a list of 20 plus guys that I want to get through and mention. This year I think there's really about 11 or 12 guys that are probably going to be fantasy relevant, which is definitely a shorter list. But a couple other names to keep an eye on: Robert Henry Jr. out of UTSA. Projected 6th rounder Adam Randall out of Clemson, Noah Whittington out of Oregon, and then Jamarian Miller, who you might know as Jam Miller, from Alabama. So a couple bigger time programs there between Alabama, Oregon, Clemson, with guys to keep an eye on. But I don't know that the current draft projection is going to make those guys a name to to be all that worried about. But I figured I would mention them here. All right, so let's head on over to the wide receivers where, it's the bread and butter of this class. There's a ton of names here that I think are really interesting. I'm going to name drop 28 different players here. I'm really going to go into, the players that I'm going to actually talk about more than just their name is probably going to be limited to more like 18 or so. But again, because this is where the bulk of the info in this class is, I want to spend a little bit of time on it. And let's start up at the top. The 3 players going, ahead of everybody else in the top 5 of every rookie draft at the moment. Carnell Tate currently at the top of the list. He's being drafted on Mock Draft Database above everyone else. He's out of Ohio State. He's 21 years old, 6'3", 195 pounds. He had an 82.9 PFF grade. And last season at OSU, 51 catches, 875 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So he shared a receiver room with Jeremiah Smith, who is the consensus 101 in next year's class. But Carnell Tate, very good player. He's got good size at 6'3". He's a smooth route runner, first down, chain mover. And he got on the field early as a sophomore. And, Ohio State wide receivers have just consistently been great in the NFL. So this is likely going to be yet another one of those guys in a long line. And so I think Carnell Tate at this point in the process, just checks a lot of those boxes. Not necessarily elite production, but still very good production, and a player that I think will be a very solid, capable pro at the next level. He's projected to go in the top 10, so we definitely like that. And he'll be one of those names that we look for early on draft night. All right, so next up is Arizona State wide receiver Jordan Tyson. Another projected first rounder, 21.4 years old, 6'2", 200 pounds, 88.6 PFF grade. Last year at Arizona State, 61 catches, 711 yards, and 8 touchdowns. He played his freshman season at Colorado before transferring over to ASU. And a couple big headlines with Jordan Tyson. I think the biggest one of all is the injury history. So Jordan Tyson had a huge knee injury in 2022 at the end of his time with Colorado. ACL, MCL, the whole thing with the knee, right? And so that knocked him out for practically the entire next year. And, that's a big injury there. And then in 2024, he had a broken collarbone. And then this past year, he had a bunch of hamstring injuries that limited him, knocked him out for a few games. So injuries have been the big story with him. But when he does play, he's been elite. He is got the true NFL size at 6'2", 200. He can, do it across the middle of the field. He can do it in the end zone. He had 8 touchdowns this year, so he's a good red zone guy, and was the clear, alpha receiver of the Arizona State, receiver core. So a lot to like with Tyson. I'm certainly a bit worried about the injuries. Not so much about the collarbone, but I think the hamstring injuries and the knee injury are something that worry me a little bit. So early in the process, he's looking more like my wide receiver 3, but I think it just depends on how you handle injury risk. I tend to be a little bit more risk averse, whereas others, are willing to take that gamble. So that might come into play for your own rankings. But at number 3, and the other player that's going to be in this grouping is Makai Lemon from USC. So another first rounder. 21.6 years old, so another guy that is still not yet 22, so we do really like that about this draft class. A lot of young receivers, whereas a lot of the running backs are older, and the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks and the running backs are definitely an older group, but the wide receivers significantly younger. A lot of guys still under 22, a lot of guys that are under 23, and Lemon is another one of those guys. 5'11", 195, 90.8 PFF grade this year, so the best of the bunch on this list. And he had a great year stat-wise. 79 catches, 1,156 yards, and 11 touchdowns. He won the Blitnikoff Award as the best receiver. And Makai Lemon is such an interesting player to me because I usually don't like the wide receivers that are quote-unquote undersized. To me, 5'11", 195 feels a little bit undersized. Now, I think to be truly undersized, you're probably looking, more of the 5'10", 190 and under type of situation. But he's not a big-bodied receiver, right? But he's got great hands. He's a great route runner. He is not somebody that is a screen merchant. There's a few receivers on this list that are definitely screen merchants, where they're not big downfield threats and they just catch a lot of screen passes. Lemon is not that guy. Excuse me. Now, he had some huge games in the second half of the season against quality competition. His game against Iowa stands out, and he was the focal point of a good USC offense. And, he is somebody that, at least based on, his skill set and his numbers, possesses everything you would want to be the number 1 receiver in this class. I think it just comes down to size and how comfortable you are with taking, a receiver that's not 6 foot. But we've seen plenty of receivers of this type of size do well in the NFL. He's not small enough to the point where I'm worried about him. I think there are a couple of other receivers that are a little bit smaller, but we're not talking, we're not talking about a 5'9", 170 type of player. So I think you're going to hear a ton of Amon-Ra St. Brown comps, both because they both went to USC, but, they can both play from the slot. Lemon can also play from the outside. Just consistent, great hands. I think there are a lot of similarities, so you're going to hear a ton of it from every analyst out there. But I think it's a pretty good comp for Makai Lemon. And obviously, if he turns into somebody like St. Brown in the NFL, you're going to be thrilled. So That's the idea with Mekhi Lemon. All right, next up is Denzel Boston. Wide receiver out of Washington, currently projected as a late first rounder, 22.1 years old, 6'4", 209 pounds, 88.0 PFF grade, 62 catches, 881 yards, 11 touchdowns. And Denzel Boston is sort of your prototypical outside X receiver. So big body guy, contested catches, all that kind of thing. I wouldn't say he's some great separator, route runner, etc., but a red zone threat. Teams are going to fall in love with the size. That will probably keep his draft stock relatively high. But I'm not sure yet about the athleticism, the speed, all that kind of thing. We're going to learn a lot at the combine. But Boston certainly seems like he is in the mix for wide receiver 4 in this class. Next on the list is KC Concepcion out of Texas A&M, projected late first-round pick, 21.2 years old, so you definitely like that age. He's 5'11", 190 pounds, and 78.4 PFF grade, 61 catches, 919 yards, and 9 touchdowns. And Concepcion is somebody that does a lot in the short area passing game. He's very fast, he's quick, makes guys miss. Shifty. He's a guy that teams can hand the ball off as well. There's a lot of comps every single year to, this guy's the next Debo. And it's definitely overplayed, but Concepcion actually kind of fits that mold a little bit. He got a lot of carries his freshman year. So, this is somebody that is more of a get the ball in his hands and let him, make stuff happen, as opposed to let's launch the ball down the field to this kind of, to this guy. So, not my preferred style of wide receiver, but he should get the ball into his hands a lot. And if he can get that first round capital, that will be great for his own draft stock. All right, next up we have, we kind of get into this huge grouping of guys that are currently projected to be second round picks. So players 6 through 13 on this list are all projected second rounders. Now, one or two of these guys might stink into the first. A few of them will likely fall to the third. It's just going to be how NFL teams are looking at it and what their specific team needs in terms of style of wide receiver. So Zachariah Branch out of Georgia is the first guy to talk about here. And he's 21.8 years old, 5'10", 180, 82 PFF grade, 81 catches, 811 yards, 6 touchdowns. And he was a former 5-star recruit, big-time player, transferred from USC. And Branch is somebody that I would consider a little bit more of a screen merchant. A lot of his yards and production came on screens. Now, he is somebody you want the ball in the hands of, but a little bit undersized. And he did leave USC to go to Georgia. So, I don't know. We'll see about him. I'm a little bit skeptical of the guys that are that get a huge chunk of their work in the screen game, but he has the pedigree as a 5-star guy, big time recruit. Playing at 2 high-powered programs and those offenses. So he's definitely a guy that I'm going to keep my eye on through the draft process. That could move up or down depending on how things go. But he should test well. If he doesn't test well, that's going to be probably a big reason for his drop. But this could be a guy that the combine definitely helps out. Next is Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. And this is totally opposite in terms of size. He's 22.3 years old, but he's 6'5", 200 pounds, 79.4 PFF grade. He had 62 catches for just over 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns. I've seen comparisons to him as just somebody. He's like a glider, a deep threat, just glides down the field. I wouldn't say he's like a smooth route runner per se, but can beat people with his speed. And Tennessee is one of those interesting programs where it's just such a gimmicky offense. It's hard to trust anybody coming out of there into the NFL, but he certainly has the production. He has the great size, and so that'll be a name to keep an eye on. He transferred from Tulane, so NFL teams always fall in love with guys that are 6'4", 6'5", and have some speed. So we'll see how that shakes out. But Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee is number 7. Next up at number 8, Chris Bell, wide receiver out of Louisville. And he's 6'2", 220 pounds, had an 81.8 PFF grade, just under 1,000 yards this year, 72 catches for 917 and 6 touchdowns. I think he is one of these guys that, he came onto the scene, had some big games early in the year, and is somebody that I will be definitely looking at here throughout the draft process that I think is a chance to move up. But Chris Bell at Louisville, next on the list. All right, and at number 9 is a favorite of mine, as is going to be a theme throughout this process. All the guys that went to Indiana, I'm going to know a little bit more about, having watched every single one of their games, following them along. And Elijah Surratt, projected second rounder, 22.7 years old, 6'2", 213 pounds, had an 86.1 PFF grade, and he had 65 catches for 830 yards and 15 touchdowns, which leads this entire class. In fact, he and Omar Cooper Jr. Are first and second in touchdowns out of this entire class, both out of IU. So Elijah Surratt he has good size at 6'2". He's a first down machine. If he is the guy that Indiana trusted on third down. He was Mendoza's number 1 target. The back shoulder connection between Mendoza and Surratt was incredible this year. Obviously, with the touchdowns, a big red zone threat. He performed very well against elite competition. He absolutely torched Oregon in both meetings this year. He played well against Iowa. And so, the competition, that's always something I notice among prospects is, okay, you have all these numbers and all these stats, but, who is performing well in their team's biggest games? And Surratt was somebody that did that. So that certainly is going to be something that I pay attention to. I don't think that Surratt is the best athlete. I don't know if his 40 time or anything is going to blow people away. Now, hopefully he's not too slow, but I could see he's probably a 4.5. If he's slower than a 4.6, there might be a little bit of a room for concern, but he's a great contested catch guy, got elite hands, doesn't drop the ball. Him and Cooper, they don't drop the ball, which was, a big deal for IU. And, so Surratt is going to be a productive NFL player. Whether he can be an NFL number 1, I'm not sure. I think he can be a productive number 2, but certainly he's been a reliable player, broke out early at James Madison where he was great, was also Indiana's best receiver last year as well. So he's been a very consistent high-level producer, and I think that's going to make him a second-round pick. And then next up, we have Jeremy Bernard out of Alabama. So 22.1 years old, 6'1", 204, and 71.9 PFF grade. He had 862 yards receiving on 64 catches, 7 touchdowns. And he shared that receiver room with Ryan Williams, who's kind of the bigger name. But Bernard was probably a little bit more consistent this year. So, this is a guy that followed the coaching staff over to Bama from Washington. And I think he has a solid room at the next level to be a contributor. So I don't know a ton yet about his skill set. Like a lot of these players, there's so many that, it's going to take some time to gather all the information. This is more of a, let's preview these players, get an idea of who's out there, rather than a let's go in depth on all of these players. We'll have more of those later in the spring, but Bernard, certainly an intriguing name out of Bama. Next up, we have Malachi Fields, Notre Dame wide receiver, 6'4", 222 pounds, and he got some buzz at the Senior Bowl this past week, but he doesn't have a lot of production, so he transferred from Virginia to Notre Dame. He had 36 catches for 630 yards and 5 touchdowns, 75.8 PFF grade, and I've seen some comparisons to Alec Pierce, size and speed, deep threat type of player, a jump ball guy, contested catch, type of wide receiver. I don't usually love those guys. I always tend to be a fan of more of the separators, the route runners, the middle of the field, like 10 to 20 yard type of players than the pure deep threats. I can certainly understand the appeal for NFL teams that need that, but from a fantasy perspective, it's hard to start those players on a weekly basis. So a little bit skeptical, but obviously, it has the size to be attractive to a team. So Malachi Fields will be a name to watch. Next up is Jacoby Lane, another USC wide receiver, 21.4 years old, 6'4", 200 pounds. So another guy with big size, 77.6 PFF grade. And he was the number 2 in the offense behind Lemon, 49 catches, 745 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So he's an intriguing guy from a size standpoint, but certainly overshadowed in that USC offense by Mekhi Lemon. All right, now our final second-round wide receiver is going to be probably my favorite of the entire group, and that's Omar Cooper Jr. out of Indiana. So 22.1 years old. He's a 4-star recruit out of high school, 6 foot, 204 pounds, 87.4 PFF grade, which is the highest of this entire group. In fact, that would put him right near the top of the class in terms of PFF grade. 69 catches, 937 yards, and 13 touchdowns at Indiana. So a few more catches, a few more yards than his teammate Elijah Surratt. Two fewer touchdowns. Now, the thing with the Omar Cooper Jr. is I think it was pretty clear from a college standpoint that Elijah Surratt was IU's number 1 wideout. But Omar Cooper was a great number 2, great in the red zone. I think that Cooper is probably a better athlete. I think he'll probably test a little bit better than Surratt. Cooper is a middle of the field. He's exactly what I just described a minute ago about what I look for. He's a separator. He is elite against zone coverage. He is someone that makes guys miss. He forces a lot of missed tackles. Now, he does have the tendency to kind of disappear from time to time. This is not a guy that you have to feed, 7-8 catches to every single game. He had a few where he was awesome. He had a few where he didn't do much of anything. He had a bit of a later breakout. He certainly was involved last year at IU, but he was really more of a true senior breakout. So that would be a negative for Cooper. But he possesses the traits to be a high-level NFL wide receiver, and it would not shock me if he gets steamed up into the back half of the first round. That would certainly jump him up way up this list. And, he could be someone that's my wide receiver 4 in this class if he gets the draft capital. So, NFL defenses nowadays play a majority of zone coverage, usually, north of 60, 65, 70% zone coverage. So getting a guy that is just a pure zone beater, I think is what NFL teams are going to be looking for. So he's got the size. I think he's going to have the speed, and he's not a screen guy. This is, certainly you could do that, but he had great ADOT numbers, which is average depth of target. Mendoza was looking for him down the field. Everyone remembers his insane touchdown against Penn State at the back of the end zone to win that game. So he's going to be a guy that I think is popular in NFL circles. And despite the fact that I think Surratt was a better college receiver, it would not shock me if Cooper is the better NFL wide receiver. All right, so there's everybody through the second round. Now, I'm not going to spend as much time going through all the stats and whatnot for all these other players, but I want to drop a bunch of names, their schools, other pieces of information here to know. And according to Mock Draft Database, the number 14 player on the board is Antonio Williams. He's a slot wide receiver out of Clemson, projected 3rd-round pick. He's 21.5 years old, so a younger guy, 5'11", 190. So somebody that profiles more of a pure slot in the NFL. At 15 is Skylar Bell out of Connecticut, another 3rd-round projected pick, 23.5 years old, so a bit older, but he had really, really good production. So 6 foot, 185 pounds. He had almost 1,300 yards on 101 catches and 13 touchdowns. So he definitely had the production on the field, and which is what you have to do if you're coming out of a smaller school like UConn. So Skylar Bell, a name to watch. And next up is our fourth rounder. So we got 3 of them. CJ Daniels out of Miami, Deion Burks out of Oklahoma, and Ted Hurst out of Georgia State. So don't know a ton about Hurst. Small school guy, but he's 6'3", 195. He had 1,000 yards receiving. Burks is a much smaller receiver. So he's 5'9", 188, transferred over to Oklahoma from Purdue. Not a ton of production, but was Oklahoma's number 1 wideout. And then CJ Daniels at 6'2", 205 has the size you look for, but kind of lacked the production. Only 50 catches this year, 557 yards. So, I didn't see anything from him that really stood out. But, has some of the traits that you're looking for, but I think the playoff run might have steamed him up a little bit higher than he probably should be. But that's CJ Daniels. And then fifth round guys, there's a whole bunch of them. So Josh Cameron out of Baylor, Kevin Coleman Jr. out of Missouri, Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State. That's going to be a name, Bryce Lance. Might sound familiar. That's because he is, in fact, the brother of Trey Lance. And older prospect, 24.3 years old, but he's big, 6'3", 209 pounds. He had 1,000 yards receiving, 89.3 PFF grade. So good numbers there. So he could be a nice, intriguing dart throw probably in the third round of your rookie drafts. If you were a Trey Lance fan, you'll probably like his brother. Josh Cameron and Kevin Coleman, I think, are interesting names, especially Coleman. He is, Coleman's 5'11", 180, but he was involved, early on in his career, only 732 yards, but he's a name that I've seen get some hype from people that I trust in the space. Cameron, 22.8 years old. He's a little bit bigger at 6'1", 224. He was the number 1 wide receiver over there in Baylor. And moving through the fifth round, Brennan Thompson out of Mississippi State. He's a smaller guy, 5'9", 170, but had 1,000 yards. Dejon Stribling out of Ole Miss, 23 years old, 6'2", 210, but was a big-time target there for Trinidad Chambliss, and he had 800 yards receiving there. Eric McAllister is a late-round name that intrigues me out of TCU. Projected 5th rounder, but he's 6'3", 205 pounds, 76.1 PFF grade. He had 72 catches for 1,190 yards and 10 touchdowns, and was just a really consistent, reliable piece of that TCU offense. So that could be another late-round dart throw early in the process that stands out to me. And then you've got Chase Roberts out of BYU. And he's 6'4", 210, so another big body receiver. This class as a whole, outside of Burks and Thompson and Branch, Conception, it's a lot of big names. So we got a lot of these, or a lot of big players, big outside receivers. So a lot of 6'3", 6'4". McAllister 6'3", Roberts at 6'4", Caleb Douglas out of Texas Tech, projected day 3 pick at 6'4", Dane Key, projected 6th round pick out of Nebraska, 6'3". So there's going to be a lot of late or day 3 picks that have the size to make a difference in the NFL. So will any of them do that? I don't know. It's always it's so early in the process, but we're going to take a look. I think there'll be 1 or 2 that end up standing out to me that will be a favorite click in, the 3rd, 4th round of rookie drafts. Like I mentioned, there's the Bryce Lance connection, I think, is going to be something that gets talked about a lot just because of the family. McAllister has the numbers, and then, guys like Caleb Douglas, he was an important piece out of Texas Tech this year, which had a great season making the playoff. BYU receiver Roberts, 800, or what do we got here? 802 yards out of Chase Roberts from BYU. So, he was a leader there in that offense. And then Eric Rivers is going to be the last name on this list out of Georgia Tech. He transferred over to Georgia Tech, where he had 658 yards in his final season, but he's a bit smaller at 5'11", 180. So, last guy on the list doesn't quite finish out the trend of the big X receiver, but, lots and lots of options. That's kind of the whole the overarching theme here is just the depth at wide receiver. From a quality standpoint, it obviously remains to be seen, but compared to sort of your average class, there is a lot of depth at wide receiver. So if you need a wide out, it's a great year to have a bunch of second-round picks. I think the second round is going to be full of these, second and third round wide receivers, and, we'll see how that all shakes out. But there's a clear top three with Tate, Tyson, and Lemon. And then you have that big second group that's just massive, stemming from Conception and Boston, Surratt, Cooper, Bernard, Branch, etc., all the way through. So we'll learn a lot more about those guys. We'll probably have multiple wide receiver preview shows so we can go in some depth on all of those names. But there's the huge laundry list of names. All right, so let's talk about tight ends. And outside of the top couple, I don't think it's an awesome tight end class. Kenyon Sadiq is number one out of Oregon. We mentioned him at the beginning of the show. Projected first-round pick, 20.8 years old, so we do like that. 6'3", 245 pounds, so a little bit undersized from a height standpoint. 70.4 PFF grade, 51 receptions, 560 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And so there's a lot to like about Sadiq. He's projected to be a first-rounder. He's highly athletic. And if you look at the tight end position, the guys that are elite athletes are often the guys that tend to do really well in the NFL. So the combine will be important for him and will likely separate him. Now, there's nobody currently projected to be a second-round pick, but I do think that there will be one or two that end up going in that round. Likely one of these next two. So currently number 2 is Max Clare out of Ohio State. Projected third-round pick, 22.5 years old, 6'5", 243 pounds, 69.3 PFF grade, 43 receptions for 448 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, obviously not the most important piece of the Ohio State passing offense. There was Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. But Max Clare, a solid tight end option going on day 2. And then the player that I think I'm most excited about outside of Sadiq at this position is going to be Eli Stowers out of Vanderbilt. He's the guy I think will get into the second round. And he's 22.8 years old, 6'4", 235 pounds, 81.6 PFF grade, which is the highest out of all the guys on my list here in this draft class. And he had 62 catches for 769 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he has the stats, he has the size. He's, still young enough, being under 23, although by the time the season starts, he'll be 23. And he had the PFF grade, part of that, high-flying Vanderbilt offense. And so Stowers has definitely got to keep an eye on that I think could end up in the second round of rookie drafts, presuming he goes on day 2. Now, the final day 2 tight end that I have on this list is Michael Trigg out of Baylor, projected third rounder, a little bit older, 23.6, but he's 6'4", 240 pounds, 72.4 PFF grade, had 50 catches for 694 yards and 6 touchdowns. So he and Josh Cameron over there at Baylor, with Sawyer Robertson at quarterback. So Trigg is a guy that I think could move up a little bit as well. He's a shifty tight end. He seems pretty athletic. So he'll be somebody that we're going to look for at the combine to see if he can boost up his draft stock. Other than that, I don't know that you're going to get a ton of big-time fantasy producers at the tight end position, but I do want to at least run through some names here. Jack Endress out of Texas, projected 4th rounder, 6'4", 236. Justin Jolly out of NC State, projected 4th rounder. He's only 21 and a half years old, at 6'3", 263. He had some solid receiving numbers this year, including 7 touchdowns. So he's probably kind of that sleeper guy as a receiving tight end. Eli Raridan out of Notre Dame. He's a huge tight end. He's 21.9 years old. So you like the age, but he's 6'7", 252 pounds. And, he had over 400 yards receiving. Oscar Delp out of Georgia. He's a name that's been around the past couple years. A lot of hype, not a lot of production. Joe Royer out of Cincinnati. Josh Cuevas out of Alabama. Marlon Klein out of Michigan. And Dolan Bentley out of Utah. All 4th, 5th round type prospects that all have pretty good size and, solid, steady production. Bentley has the best production out of that group at 620 yards. Utah had a pretty high-flying offense. Klein, kind of continues a run of pretty good Michigan tight ends, but we'll see where he goes. I don't know that he would stack up quite as well with some of those other Michigan guys we've seen over the years, but certainly a capable guy. Same can be said with Cuevas out of Bama and whatnot. So a few names there to keep an eye on, but the key tight ends to know in this class are going to be Sadiq, Stowers, Claire, and Trigg. I think are the clear top 4, and we'll just kind of see how they shake out throughout the rest of the process. So there you have it. This was a very long show. Like I said, we're going to be taking next week off as well and coming back the week after. We're going to learn more about these rookies as we get deeper and deeper into the off season. But hopefully, some of this information was helpful to you and, have a better idea of who's in this class, what some of the strengths are going to be. I think if you had to get a general idea for what the first round would look like in terms of a top 12, I think the top 5 or top 6 is pretty set right now between Jeremiah Love, Fernando Mendoza, Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, and then Kenyon Sadiq rounding at the top 6. I think at 7 is where things can get really interesting. The current consensus would likely be Casey Conception, Denzel Boston, at the receiver spot, and then 1 or 2 of the running backs, depending on where they go, whether it's Jadarian Price, Jonah Coleman, Emmett Johnson, Nick Singleton. I would expect 1 or 2 of those guys to also go late first. And then whatever receivers end up going, close to the first round, early second, late first, whether it's a Cooper, a Branch, Surratt, Bernard, Malachi Fields, those types of guys I would imagine will be right there at the 1-2 turn, depending on how things go, along with Ty Simpson at the quarterback spot, assuming he's a first-round pick. So there's pretty much everything I wanted to throw at you for today's show. If you made it this far, make sure you're following the show. Leave us a 5-star review. I really appreciate it. And use code WARROOM on Fast Draft, which is now legal and operating in Michigan. So thank you all very much for tuning in. My name is Andrew Valancourt, and you have been listening to the Dynasty War Room podcast.